basically the main questions was about competing.
So,
in, like bikini.
what are your thoughts on it? What are your...
I want to compete,
Yeah.
but money-wise, it looks incredibly expensive, especially for as I'm in college
Yeah.
as a student.
The thing is with competing, and that's something I should be able to help a lot with, because I used to prep people for shows. That's what I did before I went down the kind of the online route and working with more athletes and GA players, particularly when I used to compete. It is expensive. You can keep the cost down. What will kill you with costs for competing isn't the things you think, like the entry fees, the tans.
Bikini.
It's the bikini. Bikini, there are things you can get pretty cheap, particularly second-hand bikinis, which sounds funny, but that's what the girls do. They just recycle them.
Yeah.
It's the cost of living up to the show is what can kill you. The only flip side of that is, particularly as a college student, you tend to refunnel your money that you would spend on nights out into your prep, which so it tends to balance a little bit better. College is actually probably one of the best places to compete if you are going to compete, because of the time. You tend to have more time and less money in college than someone that's working 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, has 3 kids, where they've got a little bit more money and disposable income, but they don't have the time. Whereas if I could go back, competing wasn't around when wasn't an option for me when I was in college. There was no men's physique. Men's fitness had just came. It was only bodybuilding, and it's the same. Guys and girls are very, very similar. It's girls have different costs because of the bikini and things like that. We'll talk to you on those, but the prep lead up is very, very similar for both genders. In the cost of a coach is the other one that could kill you. So, and it's funny because that's the one that I wouldn't skimp on. Sound right there, Tommy? Yeah. That's the one I wouldn't skimp on. Like it's Ross Edgley was on the podcast recently. Ross did a marathon pulling a Mini Cooper behind him. Dude's fucking jacked. Yeah, he's crazy, great guy. But he has this thing that he calls the pyramid of prioritization, which is, if you haven't got the bottom of it right, you can't build to the top. So the top is your bikini, the top is all these extra things. Whereas if you don't have someone guiding and coaching you along the way, it's very unlikely you want to make the show full stop. And coaching is one of those that it's not even a case of cheaping out on it in terms of or going too expensive with somebody. You got to find someone that's the right fit for you, or just somebody that's in the space that understands the space, that's honest and gives you good feedback. Like, if you know someone that has competed, even a girl that's competed in bikini.
I know there's a few in Planet. Elizabeth. Do you know Christoph?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
His fiance. She's there. So
someone like that who isn't so much prepping you, because the prep isn't that difficult, particularly as a female, and particularly for someone like you who's genetically, you will hold your glutes because you've muscle maturity in your glutes. Like you may lose things like your shoulders, and your arms may come down because there's not as much muscle maturity because of your 2, 3, 4 years seriously training. You probably need 10 to build up every body part, but with you, you'll hold a lot of that. So for you, it's going to be getting your body fat low enough, which is cardio, calorie deficit, keeping your training intense. Like,
not a fan of cardio.
Yeah, but you know what? It depends on the person, because some don't need to do cardio. Like, I remember when I used to prep people, some girls used to do very little. Like, I prepped Amanda Maroney from Recalibrated Bodies for her first show. She did very little cardio on that first one. She looked great. Like, and she didn't need it because her diet was so good and her training was so intense. But she actually added it in for her next prep then, and she got that bit leaner. So you have somewhere to go. It also depends on what you want out of competing, because Amanda went into the first one knowing that she liked it, she was going to continue. So you couldn't push the envelope too much on the first show, because you know where to go then. If you're doing 3 hours of cardio or 2 hours of cardio every day for your first show, you're going to have to do that for your second, third, fourth, fifth show, and you know where to go. Where if somebody's coming in and you just decide, well, I want to compete, I don't know if I'm going to do it long term, I just love to see how my body looked, in bikini and competing.
That was one of the main reasons I wanted to compete. I just want to see if I can actually stick to that mentality, stick to a diet.
You could. Anyone that coming from your background, you could. Like coming from an Olympic lifting background, 100%.
I can stick to the training.
Yeah.
I can do the cardio, but having to eat like the same thing.
But you don't. That's just one side of prep.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing with competition, and there's loads of misconceptions of people that want to compete, because when you think prep, you think broccoli, chicken, cardio. Like you think the usual, I've got to eat this chicken asparagus.
What I'm eating now.
Yeah, when it's not. Now that's how I used to prep, because I'm the high end of food for function. Particularly when I was prepping for shows, I was like, right, chicken, turkey, sweet potato, broccoli, porridge, repeat. Like, and I can eat like that. But sometimes I wouldn't prep people like that. I used to have recipes with certain people I prepped because they couldn't stick to the same thing over and over again. So that depends on the person, and there's lots of coaches like that. But you got to find a coach that is good with food, or somebody that's looking after you that's good with food, because it's very easy to train somebody for a show. If you've got a little bit of muscle maturity, decent genetics, load of cardio, and enough hypertrophy to create stimulation in the muscle, you'll make it for a show 100% if you get your body fat low enough. Where it's the mental stuff that'll throw you off, the boredom, the tiredness, the lack of variety. That's what you got to look into. You got to look into those coaches that have that. I don't want to be gender biased, but female coaches tend to be a little bit better with that.
Do you understand like hormone differences?
Yes,
and everything?
yeah, and don't get me wrong, there's loads of lad coaches that do that too. I know loads of guys that are brilliant with female hormones, and some guys that are great with recipes and things like that. So don't get me wrong, but it may be worth looking into females. And the thing is, when money's an issue, you may not need a full-time prep coach. Now, if it's a case that you can afford it and you can put the money aside to have, even if it's not someone that's super expensive, like you can get prep coaches for, I don't know, some have different, €75 a month, some 150, some charge you up front. Everyone has different variations and costs of it. It's probably the one that I would try and not skimp out on. I would cut costs elsewhere. I would cut costs on your food, I would cut costs on your supplements, I would cut costs on other things. I'd probably try and get somebody, unless you have...
I want a good coach that would kind of know my background.
Yes.
And my interests, like in wanting to compete. Like they kind of know my history, basically.
Yeah, but they know your history from you telling them. They wouldn't necessarily have to know you personally, but they'd know your background when you sit down. Like if you met someone for the first time, an hour in, they'd have a good gauge on what you came from, where you're coming from, and they'd know how to train you. A good coach would know how to train you, because you're going to train someone with an Olympic lifting background a little bit different to normal. You cut back the high-end Olympic lifts because they're too, with your body fat juices, they're too high risk for injury. Like they're high risk injury moves anyway, particularly when your body fat's low, because you just don't have that stabilization of fat anywhere in the body that's going to give you that extra bit of a shift if you need it. You're just not going to get it. So I would probably look into different coaches in terms of making them fit. In terms of, hey, how are you? How are things? In terms of finding the right fit, the best advice I ever give to people, guys and girls, and I get asked this pretty regularly, I must do a full video on it at some stage, is finding someone that fits with you, that you click with. Because it's very, very important, because your prep coach nearly becomes like a boyfriend or a girlfriend in prep, particularly the last few weeks, because you feel like you're talking to them all the time, you're checking in with them the whole time. If they're in your county, you're staying pretty on top of them. Like I made really close friends, like Amanda and Daniel from Calibre Bodies are really, really close friends, both because I prepped them for shows. So you build up that kind of relationship with people, and so finding someone you connect with is very, very important, and then asking yourself, is geography important to you? Do you want to be able to see them physically, or are you cool sending them photos to check in online? That's personality type. I was perfectly fine sending someone photos. I didn't have to see them physically.
I'd be like that too.
I'll do my shit, I'll do my cardio, just tell me am I on point, tell me what I need to change. If you're of that disposition, you're not limited by geography. So you don't have to be restricted. You can get someone in the UK, in Dublin, in the US. Like I'd probably stick to someone Irish based, Irish UK based, because they know the scoring system here is different. But I would look into that in terms of getting the cost in. Once you cover your costs with your trainer, a good trainer will tell you how to cut costs elsewhere. Because you'll be using supplements, you'll be getting food that's more expensive that you just probably won't need. And the beauty of prepping sometimes is because your food bill is not super expensive because the quality's high, but the quantity's low because you're in a deficit normally.
Yeah.
So you're not spending loads on food. Where it adds up is your supplements, where you're filling in gaps, which again varies person to person. You probably have to use more supplements than normal in a prep, because as you bring your body fat down that level of low, you need to balance other things out. Your immune system takes a hammering. Hormones for females, like I used to put my girls on DIM for water and just try to keep everything balanced estrogen wise, as like your body fat dropped. So you could end up spending money on that. But again, it's not extortionate. If you budgeted for it coming in, a prep doesn't have to be expensive. The day can be expensive, but you can plan for that in advance. Your tan, which you could do yourself and cut the cost, is particularly if you have a girl that's really good with tan that's competed before, they'll know which ones to use. The bikini, get a second-hand bikini, or even better, borrow one. You've got your dimensions are going to be harder to maneuver, but you'll be able to find a girl, maybe someone you know, either buy it second-hand or borrow their bikini. Cuts that cost, because buying it new is crazy expensive. And then your entry, which is, if it's RABBF or NAVA for Ireland, not that expensive. It's like €50. It's pretty cheap. That's not what's going to stop you prepping. It's the mental decision of, right, I'm doing this, and then giving yourself enough time. But that's the biggest thing. That's why it's important to talk to a coach now, or someone that has a good eye, because they can tell you how close you are. If you're thinking spring, which you probably are, spring nationals, like
maybe it would probably be next year though. Because before I'd ever decide to fully compete, I want to have at least 7-8 months of where I can focus on actual bodybuilding.
Yes, 100%, which is smart, which is very clever.
So if I was to compete, I'd probably decide by January, February, and then work towards spring of like
the following year.
Yeah,
it's a good time period, and you've got, like, they do junior bikini now as well. If they haven't, they're thinking of entering it.
I think they do. Is it first timers or something? They
do first timers. First timers is a little bit of a catch-22 though, because you can have some amazing first timers.
I remember when Tara Ivory. Yeah,
like people that have been training for years come in and they look amazing. That's not to be fooled with first timers, because Els was a first timer and she looked like she'd been competing for years. But she's 10 years training experience. So, and you can come up against someone like you'd be 20, 21, or another girl that's been training for 10, 12 years, bodybuilding, so I wouldn't let that fool you. That's why I'd always think junior bikini, because max someone's training, say, 6 years, max, really. Like if you're 22, 23, you probably have only been seriously training for 6 years. You might have started lifting at 13 or 14, but you weren't serious at least if you were 16 or 17. So at least muscle maturity, you don't get stung. So I'd look into it. Doesn't really matter, because competing is one of those funny ones. It's what I hated about it. It's what I hated and loved. You're competing against yourself on the high end, because you have no control over what a judge thinks. Like, I always use apples and oranges. Some people like apples, some people like oranges. Blondes and brunettes. Some people like blondes, some like brunettes, and that's going to affect your judging decision. If I'm attracted to a brunette, I'm going to look at her quicker than I'm going to look at a blonde, and it's going to make me score her higher. That happens. So you don't have that control. It's not like, did you lift the weight? Did you deadlift 70 kilos? Yes, no. If it did, it fucking moved off the ground. If it didn't, it stayed there. It's black and white binary, where competing subjective. It's very much down to the judge's opinion of that day. So never going into a prep, always going in expecting to win, planning to win, but never being upset when you don't, because you've no control on it. None. You've control on how you bring yourself in and how your coach brings you in. That's it. Biggest tip I would offer on that is, don't let the price be a deterrent. If you were decide in January or February that you want to take a break from Olympic lifting for a year and go and try and compete, get a coach to design your plan, or get a friend who's in the scene to design a plan, program. Sit down with them and say, look, I'll bring you out for lunch. Will you tell me how to train for an hour? Particularly someone like Els, or someone like a girl that's been in it, because they know, they'll tell you the trials, they'll tell you all the girl stuff I will tell you because I talk to my girls about it,
Yeah.
but some other coaches won't. They'll tell you how their hormones are fucked. They'll tell you how they lose their periods. They'll tell you how they lose their sex drive. They'll tell you how they rebound out the other side and can't get satiated when they eat, and as a result, they're really, really moody and they broke up their boyfriend. Like, they'll tell you that. Where
I kind of knew that before going in.
Yeah.
Just common sense, like.
Yeah, there's stuff there. That's the thing with. It's one of the reasons I actually came out of that scene is because, in good conscience, I couldn't bring my girls in knowing what it was doing to their body. Like, your body thinks you're dying. Like, effectively, and all competitors. Particularly for females, guys tend to bounce out better the other side. Particularly bodybuilders who are like supplementing back in testosterone and they're using certain, anabolics that at least supplement back in what they're losing. So health-wise, not great, but hormonally they're more balanced. Our girls don't have that. You can't balance in your estrogen. You can't add in the surplus estrogen to balance out what you're getting all fucked up because you already have an imbalance. You can't do that. So mentally preparing as a girl helps, and knowing that you're probably going to rebound out the other side when you do compete, which is fine. It also depends how you come in.
Yeah.
The slower you come in, the less likely you are to rebound out the other side. Giving yourself a year is smart, because what you'll probably have a coach do is they'll bring you in slowly, where they'll build you and bulk you and try and add some muscle to your frame, and then they'll gradually cut you down, see how you're looking, and then they will they'll cut you and see how close you are to the show.
Yeah.
And then again, slower you come in. Amanda's always the best example. She's the one I use as an example, just because she's top of mind, because we spoke of her earlier. She didn't rebound after her first show, like not badly. She prepped for shoots. She'd done other things, and that's why it's good. Because you did a shoot recently, didn't you?
With Camille.
Yeah. So kind of that prep, and if you did like a bodybuilding prep for a shoot, that would give you a good gauge on, because there's not a huge difference. It's a little bit more extreme for a little bit longer period of time, but there's not a huge difference between prepping for a shoot and prepping for a show. You've got the peak you need to nail, because you can't fuck it up, because you can't retake the photos, but you're in terms of hormone balance and things like that, there's not a huge belt off the other side. If you're going to rebound after a shoot and you get it out of the way on a shoot and it's a minimum rebound, you're probably not going to be bad after a show, So I wouldn't, as I said, the cost isn't the thing that will put you off. It's the made the mentality, made the decision that you're going to do it. College, I personally think is the best time to do it. Guy, girl, not so much bodybuilders. I think bodybuilders have to be older. You need the muscle maturity. But men's physique, men's fitness, bikini, particularly bikini, not so much women's figure, which is like muscle, female muscle.
See, that's what I would love to go into. I would much prefer to do physique over bikini.
Yeah.
But seeing some of the women come into that, I'm just sitting there like.
You're 19, remember though. Like you're.
I know, but I don't think, because with my shoulders and how damaged they are from tendonitis, I haven't put on sides on my shoulders in about a year.
Okay.
They remain the same unless I get down to a low body fat. You won't see them.
The only thing is, because you're doing Olympic lifts, you can train around shoulders a little bit better, easier in hypertrophy, because you can control the angles and parameters and ranges of motion.
Yeah.
You can't with Olympic lifts. The way it needs to go overhead or whatever movement pattern needs to do. With the beauty of building shoulders in any body part in bodybuilding or hypertrophy parameters is you can manipulate the movements and the angles so that you can still stimulate enough fibers to tear so you can grow that muscle, or you can't. You've no control on that in an Olympic lift. So I wouldn't let that be your deterrent on building shoulders, because you may find that you just have various angles on lat raises, that you do semi presses, or you angle it a certain way so that it takes the tension off the tendon. Like you can do that with hypertrophy. You can maneuver the angles. You can't do it with Olympic lifts or strength training, because you got to move the weight. So I wouldn't let that be your, because you haven't trialed that yet. It's kind of like,
I want to finish my powerlifting block now.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to compete in March or April
Nice.
for powerlifting.
Yeah.
And then after that, take like a month to deload, and then kind of work my way back in slowly. More bodybuilding.
Yeah, but it gives you a great base. Like powerlifting is probably one of the best sports to go into bodybuilding from. Olympic lifts is good for anything, but powerlifting is like, because it gives you density in the muscle. Like it gives you a bit more thickness, which is good. That thickness is good in terms of muscle maturity. It's probably why you've got more density in your muscle now than somebody that's been training for a few years just doing bodybuilding, because you've been lifting heavy. Like, so your glutes built, your legs built, you know, your back built, you know, your shoulders were built when you probably switch up training systems, but they all built through lifting heavy, you know. So I wouldn't let the shoulders be a deterrent on that, even for figure or physique down the line. I would test bikini. You know, it's kind of like,
that's kind of like the starting ground.
Yeah, it's your foot in the water.
Yeah.
Like, it's your, you know, it gives you a little bit of a taste, because you'll know after the first show, not so much if you want to do it long term, but you'll know if you definitely don't want to do it, because people will come out of a show and will never do that again. Like, people will, and they're like, I'm so glad I did it, or I'm never doing that again. We're going to head on now, Kim, so tell people where is the best place if they're going following your powerlifting, your Olympic lifting, your future bikini. I'll link it all in the description down below. Where's the best place people to find it?
Kim Murray Fit on Instagram.
Kim Murray Fit on Instagram. Go check out her lifts. She's like, what are you, 48 kilos?
47.
Yeah, some of her lifts are ridiculous. Lifting like fucking double body weight. It's nuts. Kim, thanks so much.
Thank you.